She had been in the house for 11 days before she said his name. Not Sir, not Master Kang, not the cold professional distance she had spent 11 days carefully maintaining. His name. The real one. The one that had not been spoken aloud in this house by anyone except the woman who had given it to him, and that woman had been dead for 12 years. Zola had not planned to say it. She had been walking past the base of the staircase with a tray, head down, moving with the practiced invisibility of someone who had learned early that being seen was rarely safe. She had heard his footsteps above, that particular rhythm she had already memorized, the way you memorize weather in a country you were new to, reading it for safety. She had looked up without thinking. He was at the top of the stairs. And for one unguarded second, in the late afternoon light coming through the landing window, with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled, and his face arranged in the specific tired expression of a man who had been performing authority for so long he had forgotten he was performing. He looked exactly like the boy she had known. The name came out before she could catch it. Joon-ah. Not Master Kang, not Sir, the childhood name, the private one. The one only one person in the world had ever called him. Kang Soo-joon froze at the top of the stairs. The tray was still in her hands. Her heart was hammering. 11 days of careful, deliberate invisibility, and she had just destroyed it with 2 syllables. He turned slowly and looked down at her, and the expression on his face was something she had never in 11 days seen there before. Not anger, not recognition, something older and more complicated than both. Where did you hear that name? His voice was very quiet. That was how she knew it was serious. She had learned that the louder men were, the less dangerous. It was the quiet ones who were already deciding. Zola set the tray down on the hall table, with both hands, steady. She had always been steady when everything else was falling. She looked up at him, and she told him the truth. Welcome to this channel. And honey, if you think names are just sounds, this story is going to teach you that some names are the entire map of a person's life. And sometimes the only person who knows the map is the last person anyone expected. Like this video if you're already feeling this. Subscribe because we're just getting started. And hit that notification bell because what comes next will stay with you. Let's go back to where this really began. Zola Adeyemi had been cleaning other people's houses since she was 15 years old. Not because she had no other options. She had always had other options. She was the kind of person who made options out of nothing, who turned corners that weren't there yet. But because cleaning paid, and paying was a non-negotiable foundation of everything else she was trying to build. She was 27 now, and the thing she was building had a name. A degree in nursing she was 2 semesters from completing, a sister back in Lagos who was 16 and brilliant and needed the kind of support that only consistent money could provide. And the plan was tight and specific and required her to remain employed and undisruptive for exactly 14 more months. Seoul had been part of the plan. Her aunt's contact at the staffing agency had said, wealthy family, good pay, live-in, demanding but not unreasonable, you'll be invisible most of the time. Invisible was fine. Invisible was in fact ideal. The agency had not mentioned the fiancé. Song Mi-rae arrived at the estate every Tuesday and Thursday like weather, inevitable, dramatic, impossible to prepare for adequately. She was 28. The daughter of a family whose name had been attached to Seoul's construction industry for 3 generations, and she moved through the Kang estate with the proprietary ease of a woman who had already decided it was hers. She was not cruel in the obvious way. She did not shout. She did not make dramatic scenes. She deployed a kind of cold, deliberate diminishment, the pointed pause before acknowledging staff, the slight elevation of her chin when speaking to anyone she considered beneath her, the way she managed to make the simplest instructions sound like a verdict. The first Tuesday, she had looked at Zola with the particular expression of someone cataloging a potential problem. The new girl, she had said. Not to Zola, to the head housekeeper, Mrs. Shin. Nigerian? Yes, Miss Song. Make sure she knows the good china isn't to be handled unless I'm not here. Zola had kept her face arranged in her professional neutral and noted internally that Song Mi-rae was the kind of woman who announced her insecurities while believing she was announcing authority. It was useful information. She had also noted in those 11 days other things. That the Kang estate was a house performing warmth it did not feel, expensive flowers in rooms nobody sat in, food prepared for a man who ate at his desk, staff who moved with the careful precision of people who had learned to read the atmosphere before they moved through it. That Kang Soo-joon himself was present in the house like a pressure system was present, felt before seen, changing the quality of air in rooms he entered, making people slightly more careful without anyone being able to name why. That he was not, as the rumors suggested, a man who enjoyed his power. He wore it like people wore something uncomfortable they'd been told they needed. He had been watching carefully because he always watched carefully, because watching carefully was a skill that had kept her safe and functional through 15 years of other people's houses. And on the 11th day, carrying a tray past the base of the staircase, she had looked up, and she had said his name. He came down the stairs slowly.
Let us know in the comments where in the world you are watching this video from. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and stay with us. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next video.
Not in the way of someone approaching a threat, in the way of someone approaching something fragile, something that might break or vanish if moved toward too quickly. He stopped 4 steps from the bottom, eye level with her from there. She held her ground, steady. "Where did you hear that name?" he said again, quieter this time. "I didn't hear it," Zola said. "I knew it." The staircase landing caught the last of the afternoon light. Somewhere in the house, she could hear Mrs. Shin directing the kitchen staff. The ordinary machinery of the estate continued around them. Neither of them moved. "That name," Kang Soo-joon said, "was used by one person, my mother. She died when I was 14. "I know." His jaw tightened. "Then you understand why I'm asking you how you know it." "I know it," Zola said, "because I am the person she taught it to." Silence. The kind that had weight and texture and the specific density of something being rearranged at a fundamental level. "My mother," Soo-joon said, very carefully, "taught you my childhood name. She didn't teach me, she used it, in front of me, many times." Zola held his eyes. "My name is Zola Adeyemi. 12 years ago, my father worked as a contractor on the Kang family's Jeju Island development project. We lived on site for 14 months. I was 15, you were 16. Another silence. Longer. She watched him search his memory, watched it happen, the way it happened with people recalling something kept in a deep drawer, the initial blankness, then the first thread of something, then more. "The contractor's daughter," he said, slowly, like something becoming real that hadn't been real a moment ago. "The one who taught you to speak Yoruba," Zola said. "Badly. You were terrible at it." Something happened to his face. Not quite a smile, something earlier than a smile. The specific expression of a man encountering something he had decided was gone and finding it, unexpectedly, still present. "You taught me to say Odaro," he said. "Good evening," Zola confirmed. "You said it to my father every day for 3 months until he stopped being suspicious of you. It worked. He liked you anyway. He said you were the only rich boy he'd ever met who looked people in the eye." Soo-joon descended the last 4 steps. He stopped 2 feet from her, close enough that she could see what the distance and the years and the weight of what he had become had done to his face. The boy she had known at 16 had been serious and watchful and unexpectedly funny when you trusted him enough to be. The man in front of her had kept the serious and the watchful and had locked the funny away somewhere she suspected very few people had access to. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "When they hired you, why didn't you?" "Because I needed this job," Zola said simply. "Not a favor from someone who might remember me. A job I earned on my own terms." She met his eyes. "And because I wasn't sure you would remember me at all." He looked at her for a long moment. "I remember everything about those 14 months," he said. "I remember your father's laugh. I remember the green dress you wore the day the project finished. I remember that you cried when you left, and then told me you weren't crying. I had dust in my eyes. You had dust in your eyes." They stood in the entrance hall of his estate. 12 years and an entire life apart, and something settled between them that was not romance, not yet, but was the specific warmth of something recognized. Something that said, you were real. That time was real. You remember it too. The estate had a face it showed to the world, and a face it wore at midnight. Zola had learned both within the first week. The daytime face was composed and formal, the staff coordinated by Mrs. Shin with the quiet efficiency of people who had worked long enough to anticipate rather than react. The estate kept in the impeccable state expected of a household belonging to one of Seoul's most powerful men, Song Mi-rae arriving on her scheduled days to perform the role of devoted fiancée for any observers who required that performance. The midnight face was different. It was the face of a man who ate alone, who worked until 2 in the morning in a study that smelled of old paper and cold coffee, who occasionally stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main salon and looked at Seoul the way people looked at things they had earned but did not enjoy. Zola was the only staff member who worked the late hours regularly. She had taken the late shift because it paid more and because the quiet suited her nursing studies. She had not anticipated that the late shift would mean crossing paths with Kang Soo-joon in his actual life, rather than his performed one. The first time, she had found him in the kitchen at 1 in the morning making coffee badly. She had watched him for 30 seconds from the doorway, the head of Seoul's most formidable criminal organization struggling with a French press, and then walked in and made the coffee herself, without being asked. He had looked at her with an expression she was beginning to catalog, the slightly recalibrating look of a man being treated as a person rather than a position. "You don't have to," he had said. "I know. The coffee you were making was going to be terrible." The second time, she had found him in the library at midnight with 3 empty glasses on the table beside him, and a phone call clearly just ended that had left him with the specific stillness of someone managing something that had gone wrong. She had left a glass of water and sandwich on the table and gone back to her duties without comment. He had found her the next morning before her shift began. "Thank you," he had said, "for last night. It was a sandwich. It was the first thing someone gave me yesterday without wanting something in return." She filed that away, the way she filed everything, not immediately useful, but worth keeping. The third time had been the night before the name on the staircase. Song Mi-rae had stayed late, and Zola had overheard the tail end of an argument through the closed study door. Not the words, but the tones. Mi-rae's voice carrying the particular combination of accusation and performance that Zola had learned to read in the first week, and Soo-joon's voice saying almost nothing. Nothing. The silence of a man who had long since stopped believing the argument was worth having. Mi-rae had left. Soo-joon had gone upstairs, and Zola had stood in the hallway and understood, with the clarity of someone who had spent 12 years watching the shapes of other people's lives, that the man at the top of those stairs was profoundly, methodically, completely alone. This did not make her feel what she expected to feel. It did not produce sympathy exactly. It produced something more specific: recognition. The particular recognition of someone who understood what it meant to be surrounded by people and still be the only person in the room. The next afternoon, she had carried the tray past the staircase, and she had looked up, and the name had come out. The fourth time was different from all the others. She had been studying at the kitchen table at midnight when she heard something she had not heard before in the 11 days she had lived in this house. Not footsteps, not a phone call, not the measured quiet of a man managing his life with deliberate control. Laughter. Brief, real, entirely unguarded, coming from the direction of the main salon. She set down her pen and listened. It stopped almost immediately, caught, pulled back, controlled. But for that half second, it had been completely genuine, the specific sound of someone who had surprised themselves. She did not investigate. She was not the kind of person who inserted herself into moments she had not been invited to. But she sat at the kitchen table for another 20 minutes after that. Her pen still, thinking about what it meant that a man who carried the weight of Seoul's underworld on his shoulders made that sound when he forgot, for half a second, to carry it. She thought about the boy on Jeju who had laughed at the most absurd things, at the way the seagulls argued over a single piece of bread, at her terrible attempts to teach him Yoruba tonal distinctions, at himself when he made mistakes, which he had been remarkably willing to do at 16 in a way she suspected he was not at 28. She thought about what it cost a person, over 12 years, to lock that away. The next morning, she had made 2 cups of coffee instead of 1, and left the second on the corner of his desk with a folded note that said, "You should laugh more. It suits you." He had not mentioned it, but that afternoon, passing her in the corridor, he had paused and said, "The coffee was better than yesterday's," and walked on. She had understood this as the closest he was currently able to come to "thank you for noticing." She had accepted it as such. Song Mirai noticed on a Thursday, not the name on the staircase. She had not been there for that. What she noticed was subtler and therefore considerably more dangerous. She noticed the quality of attention. It happened at lunch. Mirai had arrived to find Soo-joon already at the dining table. Unusual, he rarely ate at the table when Mirai was present, usually taking the opportunity to work through meals. And the conversation between them had a different texture than usual. Less formal, something in it that suggested 2 people who had recently passed through a shared memory and were still carrying the warmth of it. Mirai had watched this for approximately 40 seconds. Then she looked at Zola, who was refilling the water glasses. The look said everything her voice did not. That evening, Mirai found Zola in the linen room. She did not shout. She was not the kind of woman who shouted. She closed the door behind her with the deliberate care of someone who had thought carefully about this moment. "You're very comfortable here," Mirai said. "I do my job well," Zola said. "You do more than your job." Mirai's voice was pleasant in the way that things were pleasant when they were not actually pleasant. "I notice you've begun taking the late shifts regularly. They pay more. And they give you access to parts of this house most staff don't see." Zola folded a pillowcase with even hands. "I clean the rooms that are used. That's what I'm paid for." "You know what I think?" Mirai took one step closer. "I think you came here knowing exactly who he was. I think you've been building something very carefully, and I think you're going to stop." "I think," Zola said, setting down the pillowcase, "that you should be more concerned with the fact that the man you're engaged to has not looked at you the way you want him to in a long time, and less concerned with where a maid is spending her evenings." The room went very quiet. Mirai's composure held. It was a good composure, years of practice, but Zola saw the moment beneath it, the flash of something true and wounded that Mirai immediately covered with ice. "You have 1 week," Mirai said. "Find another position. I serve at Master Kang's pleasure, not yours." Mirai left. The door closed with perfect, controlled quietness. Zola stood in the linen room and breathed steadily and acknowledged to herself that she had just made an enemy. Not out of carelessness, she knew what she was doing, but out of the specific refusal to shrink that she had promised herself at 15 she would never again perform for anyone. She had kept that promise imperfectly over the years. Tonight, she kept it well. He found her in the library that night. Not by accident. She understood by now that very little Kang Soo-joon did was by accident. He had come to find her specifically. He sat in the chair across from her study materials without him being invited, and looked at her with a direct attention she had come to understand was simply how he looked at things he considered worth his time. "Mirai spoke to you," he said. "She did." "What did she say?" "She told me to find another position." His jaw tightened. "I'll speak with her." "You don't need to." Zola looked up from her notes. "I'm not leaving because Song Mirai told me to. I'm staying because the job is mine and I do it well, and no one in this house has the authority to end that except you." Something shifted in his expression. "You're not afraid of her."
I'm not afraid of people who lead with threats. Threats are what you use when you've run out of actual leverage.
He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're still the same." "You're not." "No." He looked at his hands, then back at her. "I'm not." She set down her pen. "Tell me what happened, after Jeju, after your mother." A long pause, the kind that said, "This is territory I don't take people into." But he had come to find her specifically. He had sat down without being invited. The pause was not refusal, it was preparation. He told her. Not everything. She understood there were rooms in his life she did not yet have clearance to enter, but the shape of it. His mother's death the year after Jeju. His father's decision that grief was inefficiency, that the business required a successor who did not have time for mourning. The slow, systematic replacement of the boy Zola had known with the man Seoul knew. "She used to call me Joon-ah," he said, "my mother. She said it was a name she used when she was talking to me, not to who she needed me to become." "I know," Zola said. "She told me that. The last week we were on Jeju, she told me that." He looked at her. "She liked you. She was kind to me. She was the first adult in that project who spoke to me like I had opinions worth listening to." "She would have liked knowing you came back. She would have told me to stop pretending the pillowcases were more interesting than the conversation." The almost smile. Brief, genuine, the first entirely unguarded expression she had seen from him. Zola. He said her name carefully, the way he had always said it at 16, learning it for the first time, like something worth pronouncing correctly. "Why are you really here? Not the agency, not the money. Why this house?" She considered the question. She had been considering it for 11 days. She had the honest answer and she had the safe answer. She chose the honest one because she had always chosen honest over safe, and it had cost her sometimes and saved her more. "Because when I was 15, a boy on Jeju Island was the first person my age who talked to me like I was worth talking to, and I spent 12 years wondering what happened to him. And when the agency said the name Kang and showed me the address, I thought, I'll take the job, and I'll see." And you're sadder than I expected, and lonelier, and you're doing something with your life that I think you would not choose if the choice had been genuinely yours. She held his eyes. "But you're also still the person who used to make me laugh at the most ridiculous things, and then pretend he hadn't. I don't do that anymore." "I know. That's the sad part." The library was very quiet. The city hummed beyond the windows. Soo-joon sat with his hands flat on the arms of the chair and looked at her with the expression of someone who had opened the door expecting a room and found instead an entire other wing of a building they had lived in for years. "Maid and I," he said, "it's an arrangement. It has been for 3 years. My father's preference, her family's connections. I have no more feeling for her than she has for me." "She has feeling for you. She has feeling for the position." "Maybe, but she's also a woman who's been told her entire life that the best she can be is attached to the right man. That makes people dangerous and sad." Zola picked up her pen. "I'm telling you this not to defend her. I'm telling you so you understand what you're dealing with." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're going to be a very good nurse." "I know. Because you see people. I've had a lot of practice." She had her own truth to give him, and she gave it carefully. That she had not come here with a plan beyond curiosity and the practical fact of the salary. That she had spent the first 3 days telling herself this was coincidence, the staffing agency, the name, the address,
and the next 8 days acknowledging that she had known from the moment she walked through the gate exactly what kind of house this was, and exactly why she had said yes to it. That she had been afraid arriving, not of him, she had never been afraid of the boy she remembered, but of the distance between that boy and the man the world described. She had been afraid of meeting a stranger wearing a familiar face. "And?" he had asked. "And you still hold your coffee cup with both hands when you're thinking," she said. "You did that at 16. I thought it was strange then. Now I think it's the most honest thing about you." He looked at his hands, then at her. The expression she was beginning to understand was not recalibration, but something older, the look of someone slowly, carefully removing armor they had forgotten they were wearing. "My mother used to say that," he said, "that I held things like I was afraid they would leave." "Maybe you were. Maybe I still am." The library held that between them. Neither of them moved towards it or away from it. They let it exist, the way honest things needed to exist. Not resolved, not dismissed, just present and true, and shared between two people who had both spent considerable portions of their lives learning to need very little so that losing things would cost less. "You're going to be fine," Zola said, finally. "Not because of me, because you already know the difference between performing a life and living one. You just forgot you knew." He looked at her for a long moment. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say the true thing without making it sound like a verdict." "Practice," she said. 12 years of other people's houses. You learn to say what's real without making people feel destroyed by it. It's the same skill as nursing, actually. Telling someone the truth about their condition while also letting them know they are more than their condition. And what is my condition? She considered him. This man in his library at midnight, jacket off, guard down, holding his coffee cup with both hands. "Treatable," she said. And for the second time in 24 hours, Kang Soo-joon laughed. Let us know in the comments where in the world you are watching this video from. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and stay with us. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next video.
It happened on a Sunday when Soo-joon was away for business and the house was quieter than usual. Mirai arrived at 10 in the morning, which was unusual. Her scheduled days were Tuesday and Thursday. She arrived with two women Zola did not recognize and the specific energy of someone who had decided a window was open and intended to use it. She called a staff meeting, all staff, present immediately in the main salon. Mrs. Shin looked at Zola with an expression that communicated clearly that this was not normal procedure, and also that there was nothing Mrs. Shin could do about it. In the salon, Mirai stood with her hands clasped and addressed the assembled staff with the practiced authority of someone who had been rehearsing. "I want to inform you all," she said, "that Master Kang and I have agreed it is time to begin transition planning for our upcoming household arrangement post-marriage. As the future mistress of this estate, I'll be implementing some staffing changes effective immediately." She looked at Zola, starting with the dismissal of the position currently held by Adeyemi. The room went very still. The position, Mrs. Shin said carefully, was filled at Master Kang's specific request. "Master Kang's preferences are managed by his household staff on his behalf. I am his future wife, and I am managing this on his behalf today." It was well constructed, Zola thought. The authority was borrowed, but it was borrowed from the right place, from the institutional weight of her upcoming position, from the assumption that a fiancé spoke for the household. In a different house with different staff, it might have worked entirely. "Miss Song," Zola's voice was even. Every person in the room turned to look at her. "May I ask you to show me the documentation of Master Kang's authorization for this meeting?" A pause. "I don't need his authorization. I am his—" "You are his fiancée," Zola said. "That's a social position. It doesn't carry administrative authority over household employment decisions. Those decisions belong to Mrs. Shin under Master Kang's directive." She looked at Mrs. Shin. "Is that correct?" Mrs. Shin straightened almost imperceptibly. "That is correct." Mirai's composure cracked. Not dramatically, she was too practiced for drama, but Zola saw it. The moment her plan met an obstacle she hadn't prepared for, someone who knew the actual rules. You, Mirai said, very quietly, are going to regret this. Maybe, Zola said, but today I'm going to go back to work because I have a job to do. She walked out of the salon. Behind her, she heard Mirai's voice, controlled, directed at Mrs. Shin. Have her things out of the staff quarters by this evening. She heard Mrs. Shin's response. I will convey your request to Master Kang when he returns. He came back that evening. Zola was in her room when she heard the car. She had not packed. She had considered it and decided against it, not out of stubbornness, but out of the specific refusal to participate in a conclusion that had not yet been written. Soo-joon's footsteps on the stairs, then his voice, speaking to Mrs. Shin, brief and quiet. Then footsteps on the corridor toward her room. A knock. Come in. He stood in the doorway. He had been traveling for 2 days. He looked like it. Jacket over his arm, the particular worn quality of someone who had been performing authority in rooms full of people who needed things from him and had only just arrived somewhere he didn't have to. He looked at her room, at her things, unpacked, at her. You're still here, he said. I told you I wasn't leaving because Mirai told me to. She called me, he said. She said you humiliated her in front of the staff. I asked her to show documentation of your authorization. She didn't have any. That's not humiliation. That's procedure. He set his jacket over the chair inside the door and leaned against the frame, the posture of a man who had made a decision and was now settling into it. I ended the engagement today, he said. Before I came home, I called her father. Silence. That's... Zola stopped. Started again. That's not because of me. No, he said. It's because it was already over 3 years ago, and I've been performing a continuation that wasn't real because it was easier than the alternative. He looked at her. But you being here, you saying my name on those stairs, reminded me that I used to know the difference between things that were real and things I was performing, and I don't want to forget that again. Soo-joon, she said. His name. The real one. He looked at her with the expression she had been cataloging for weeks, the one that started as recalibration and had become, gradually, over 11 days of late shifts and library conversations and the name at the top of the stairs. The expression of a man who had found something he had not known he was missing until the moment it was there. I'm not asking you to be anything other than what you are. I'm not asking you to become part of this life if you don't want to. You have a degree to finish. You have a sister to support. You have a plan. I do. I'm only asking... He stopped. Started again, more carefully. I'm asking if there's a version in that plan where you don't disappear again after 14 months. Zola sat with that for a moment. The honest answer and the safe answer. She had always chosen honest. There might be, if the person asking was worth staying for. The almost smile. Full, this time, all the way to his eyes. Work on that, she said, and I'll work on mine. 2 months later, Zola Adeyemi passed her nursing practical with the highest score in her cohort. She called her sister first. Her sister screamed and cried and listed every person in Lagos who was going to hear about this before the day ended. She called Soo-joon second. He answered on the first ring, which he had learned meant he had been waiting. I passed, she said. A pause. The kind that held something it was still deciding how to say. Of course you did, he said. That's all? No, he said. But the rest of it I'll say when you get home. She laughed. She had been laughing more lately. It turned out that when you stopped performing smallness, there was considerably more room for other things. I'm not home yet. I'm still at the examination building. Then get in the car, he said, and come back. She walked out into the Seoul afternoon, into the specific quality of spring light that made even the ordinary parts of the city look like they were announcing something, and thought about a boy on Jeju Island who had learned to say good evening in a language that was not his because it mattered to her father. About a name whispered at the top of a staircase. About what it meant to be seen, Really seen by someone who had been paying attention across 12 years and an entire ocean. She got in the car. She went back. For everyone who was told they were invisible, this story was for you. For everyone who carried a name in their heart for years without knowing if they'd ever use it, this story was for you too. Like this video if you believe that some things wait exactly as long as they need to. Subscribe if you stayed until the very end. And drop a comment. Did you know from the first scene or did you need the staircase moment? I'll see you in the next story.